So we got a service call of a water leak. Check this out. That is ice, frozen solid. So the temperature controller or the water valve was stuck on and filled the entire cell deck pad up, and they've been dropping into the 20s at nighttime here. Look at that. It's insane, huh? So we've been getting the drain clear, and then I'm gonna fire this unit up. It's direct fired makeup air unit, so I'm gonna get this guy to fire right now and try to melt this, but I'm gonna tighten up these belts first. We have to, we're gonna have to leave this panel off right here, and we're gonna go ahead and set the heating temperature controller, which is this guy right here. It was set at 45 degrees. Well, we're gonna set it a lot higher, so basically it's gonna run almost all the time. And that's gonna help, because I can't shut the unit off because then the building will be so out of balance that they'll freeze the customers in the dining room. So we need this air going in, but we need that heater on it running. So we're gonna probably set that around probably 60 degrees or something like that, and it's expected to get into the 30s, high 20s basically. So then we're gonna leave this panel off, and then we're just gonna let this slowly defrost. It's gonna take some time. So I'm back now. This thing's fully defrosted like it should be. We're gonna pull this whole cassette out right here that has the cell deck media in it, so that way I can inspect the cell deck. I have a feeling that the cell deck's gonna be damaged from all that ice. The problem is that it's not budging, so I'm worried that handle's gonna rip off, because I'm gonna have to put a rope on there. They really should have put two handles side by side or something. So it's difficult to get my hand in there because I couldn't pull hard enough, but putting a rope on there and just coming back about 3 feet gave me a little extra leverage and pulling power. So now it's sliding out. So pulling out this cell deck, you want to be cautious because you don't want it to drop onto this rubber or plastic roof and damage it. So I put a cinder block under there to catch it when it comes down, because I don't have two people here right now to pull this thing out. So cinder block down there, and then I'll be holding this back end right here because I don't want it to jam down on that gas line either. Okay, so the cell deck was damaged a little bit by the ice. It's not horrible, but the cell deck in general is disintegrating when you touch it. It's just, yeah, it's definitely time to replace no matter what we do. Even if that ice wasn't there, it's time, because it's just disintegrating with my hands. This is just one side. This gap usually isn't here on this. I believe that's from the ice compressing, getting stuck between there and smashing the cell deck down over on this side over here, because usually those things fit in there pretty tight. Here's the other side. You can see that ice definitely got in between this gap and just compressed in each direction, smashing it in. Up here is pretty, it's just disintegrating. All this stuff is just like cardboard, so after it's gotten enough water on it, it eventually just goes bad. You need to replace this occasionally. So we're gonna definitely, as part of the quote to repair this unit, we're gonna change this cell deck pad, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull this unit out and finish diagnosing. So we currently have about 45 degree air coming into this makeup air unit. We're just going through our troubleshooting steps. The first thing I want to do is test this temperature controller. So we're going to turn it and listen where it clicks. So the temperature controller for the evaporative cooler section is working fine. It's turning on and off around 45. Let's go ahead and look at the temperature controller for the heating section just to test that too. Temp control for the heating section is also working properly, about 45. Okay, so I have the unit powered down completely at the disconnect. No power, no operational power. And I turned the water on, and we are spraying across all the misters. Well, some of them. Some of them are really dirty too, so they need to be cleaned. But we have got a bad water solenoid valve. It is stuck open in the open position. So we are going to have to change that water solenoid valve. It does look like you can take it apart, but the screws are all rusted out, so there's no point in that. So we're going to change the water solenoid valve. and then go from there. But right now it's winter time, so we don't even need the evaporative cooling, so we'll have to order a water solenoid valve, and then we'll take those guys apart, the misters, and clean them, use like ice machine cleaner, clean the tubes, get them spraying, and then we'll replace the cell deck pad also. And everything else seems to be working fine. Yeah, everything else is good. So temperature controllers are fine, heating section's working good. So I'm gonna put that cell deck back in there. I don't want to leave it on the roof because we have high winds here, and I'm afraid it'll end up on the freeway. So we'll put the cell deck back in, get this guy started up. So before I left, I wanted to see the burners light again on this guy, and I was having a hard time. I couldn't get my airflow to prove. It would prove and then it would stop. And when I say prove, I mean the pressure switch, because we've got two pressure switches on here wired in series to sense if we have essentially low pressure or high pressure, because it wants to be in that happy number. So if you look inside the book, it says that it wants the pressure differential to be between 0.15 and 0.80, which right now we're at 0.55, okay? But we got a couple problems here. In order for me to prove that pressure switch, I needed to block off airflow because I had way too much airflow going to this unit. So what I did was I just took that panel and partially covered the airflow, and my pressure switch proved. Okay, so we're moving too much air. Now, I'm gonna pull this panel out and show you guys. So right now, my pressure differential is bouncing around still, but 0.5, 0.6, I saw 0.7 once. All right, I pulled that panel out. Okay, so the panel's right there. And then now look at my pressure differential. 0.9, it jumps all the way up to 1.1, 1.2. So we've got an airflow problem here. Now, before I start, I mean, I could easily just adjust the motor pulley. I could do all kinds of stuff, but here's the problem. Number one, we know our cell deck pad is compromised and it's not, it's not filling the void correctly because it's been crushed. So we're passing some air through on the cell deck. Also, it's all these little things. Also, we've got filters that are messed up. I don't really think the filter is going to be the problem per se, but we are going to change that filter. And we've got a pulley that's going bad. So I'm not going to try adjusting on that pulley at this time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and quote this guy. We can adjust the pulley when we come back if we need to. I don't want to mess with their building balance too much. But you know, there's always a possibility that it's been improperly adjusted from the beginning and maybe they're trying to move way too much air through this unit. We'll find out when we come back. So we're going to quote to replace the cell deck pads, okay, to change that water solenoid valve. We're going to quote to change the motor pulley or sheave, whatever you want to call it, put new belts on it, and then we'll test the system again. It's also possible that I could be having an airflow issue. This particular location right now, the wind is blowing directly at me right now, and it's blowing through the filters, through the cell deck pad into the unit, and that could probably explain some of my bouncing around that we're doing here. How it's 1.03, then it drops all the way down to 0.7. That would probably be explained by the wind, and if that's the case, that's going to be an even bigger problem, because this is an installation problem, because this is basically, you know, directly at the wind. We come up a mountain pass up here and that wind blows right through this unit, straight into this unit. So that could be the problem too. But I'm not going to jump to conclusions yet. We're going to go ahead and fix the problem at hand, which is the water solenoid valve. We'll put the new pulley on there and then we'll go from there. Then we'll bring it up to the customer and let them know, hey, this is what we need to do. To be honest with you, they really, I mean, you usually don't see direct fired makeup air units in California for the most part. This is up in the high desert, so it does get pretty cold. Currently right now it's in the 40s. For us, that's crazy. I shouldn't say crazy. I mean, they drop into the low 20s. And then like as an extreme up here, but that's about it. So right now, you know, when I was talking to the cooks, they kind of mentioned to me that it's always hot in the kitchen. Well, in my opinion, what's happening is the kitchen AC is running the heater all the time. because this is blowing cold air into the building. And basically the sensor for the kitchen is in the front of the kitchen, and all throughout the kitchen they're just dying because the heater's running all the time. Well, I think if we could temper the air on this Makeup Air unit a little bit more and control the temperature, then maybe that kitchen AC's heater wouldn't run as much. So, but like I said, we're gonna, you know, start with the simple stuff and then we'll talk to them. Just to get a look at the burner section, I really don't see any problems. You know, there's our dampers, they open up, and yeah, everything seems to be doing pretty good. Our panels have the spring action to them, so they slam themselves shut, so they're not getting pushed open. That could be a problem if the spring closing hinges on these panels weren't working. But yeah, other than the burner assemblies being dirty and kind of rusted out, probably because that evaporative cooling solenoid valve has been running wide open for a while. Probably should do a good little cleaning inside there. There's a bunch of dust buildup and everything, corrosion. But yeah, I like on these higher end Makeup Air units how they have the pressure test ports for you and everything, so that way you can, that's on the other side, that's what I was hooked to. And then there's another one right here, so you can see both sides of the burner assembly. So it's pretty nice. But yeah, blower assembly back there, don't see any major problems with it. Everything's looking good so far. So all right, so this was a service call, well, originally a service call on a water leak. When we arrived, we found that the cell deck pads for the Makeup Air unit were completely iced up because the water solenoid valve was stuck in the open position. And it was just basically running and running and running. The outdoor air temperatures, this is up in the high desert of Southern California, so the outdoor air temperatures have been dipping into the high 20s at nighttime. And on top of that, the fact that it's not just flowing straight water, it's misting water, so it's dropping the pressure coming out of the misters, so it's basically creating a snow machine. And you know, that water's freezing and then creates a giant ice block. So when that happened, it just kept running for quite a while from the looks of it, and eventually it started leaking water down into the building. It ended up damaging the cell deck pads, as you guys saw. I pulled the unit out and the cell deck pads have damage. There's air bypassing the cell deck pads now. On top of that, when I first arrived, the first time I was here, the unit had loose belts, and then when I went to go tighten the belts, I could tell that the motor pulley was bad. It was worn out. So we're going to go ahead and replace the motor pulley. Well, we're going to submit a quote to replace the motor pulley. We're going to replace the cell deck pads, replace the water solenoid valve. Then we got to figure out the airflow issue. So like I showed you, when it was iced up, I had no problem firing up the burners. But right now that there's no ice on there, I'm having a really hard time proving the correct air, and we're getting too much air essentially. It could be a factor of a lot of things, okay? So like I said, we're gonna change that. We're gonna change all the parts that I talked about first before we go any further into figuring out the airflow issue, okay? Because the cell deck pads, they need to be solid and tight. You know, the motor pulley needs to be working correctly, and then we can try some things. We can adjust the motor pulley, slow the blower down. Worst case scenario is we're gonna have to add a transition and turn that eyebrow that the metal mesh filters are in the opposite direction, so that way it doesn't get blown by the wind from, you know, the wind coming up their mountain pass that we're right by. I really don't want to go that route. I really think we can solve it by just slowing down the airflow, but we will see when we come back. So that's pretty much it, guys. In no way am I a professional with these direct fired. I mean, am I an expert with these direct fired Makeup Air units? Really, we don't deal with these very much here in Southern California. I mean, but if you just use some common sense and read the manual, which, you know, that does a lot for you, you can kind of diagnose them. And that's essentially what I did. I mean, I've never really encountered, other than 2 or 3 times, those modulating gas valves that are on this. And, you know, but if you just start with the manual, check the basics, you can usually figure them out. Hey, I just want to say thanks a lot for taking the time to watch these videos, guys. I always say this, but I truly mean it. I mean, it humbles me very much to know that you guys are actually watching these videos. I mean, it just kind of blows my mind. You know, I try to share the little bit of knowledge that I have with you guys. Try to share it so that way, hopefully, you don't make the same mistakes that I do, and just give little tips. And, you know, I hope you guys are enjoying these. I also, if you haven't already, I suggest you guys subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. Leave me some feedback down in the YouTube comments. Give me a thumbs up. All that stuff helps me with YouTube, so I'd really appreciate it. Also, you know, there's a lot of other guys that make great content on YouTube. All right, popping up around me or at the end of every one of my videos is, you know, I recommend other channels. I suggest you guys check them out because everybody makes some cool stuff and you can learn something from all these people. Okay, so popping up right now. Check these guys out. Okay, other than that, I will see you guys on the next one. Okay.